Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. The 20th anniversary update is coming soon onto the PTR, and with it comes some healer reworks. So we're going to go over some of the biggest changes coming in for some of the healers, namely in Paladin and Monk, although a couple others got some minor changes. Some of the important things is Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet. For Drakthir Evokers, the entire ability has been increased to 3 minutes, but when you are spec'd into, or when you actually are an Evoker, the ability cooldown can be further reduced by having Clobbering Sweep or Heavy Wing Beats. So one of the abilities, probably your knock back, is going to be a little bit weaker, but then you'd probably talent into something like Clobbering Sweeps. Your swipe, your knock up is going to be a little bit more effective onto that one. They've also made it so that basically all of the different raid buffs that you're applying to your allies cost less mana, which is awesome to see. For Resto, they made a change making a talent called Reactive Resin, which is a PvP talent, a baseline talent, which is kind of odd because when your healer over time effects are removed by enemies, they're replaced with Reactive Resin, healing an ally over 6 seconds with multiple stacks available to overlap. So, not quite sure about that. Wildstalker gets Flourish affecting Symbiotic Blooms, although I'm pretty sure most of the time, most of the Druids are running Keeper of the Grove when they're running Flourish in raids, so Kind of some strange changes. Boomkin, however, was getting a crazy amount of changes onto that one, but I'll leave that for the Boomkins. Other news for Evokers, they did like a little bit of like notes in the Wowhead section where they were like adjusting Life Force Mender's like tooltip, but it didn't actually change anything. They made it so Renewing Blaze is no longer affected by healing received modifiers, which this is kind of just a slight thing. Seems more PvP focused than anything else. So Evoker really not getting many big changes, although I'm still kind of keeping an eye out for it if there's going to be any additional changes when it comes to their like tuning right before the raid drops, or maybe after heroic weekends. Something I'm still going to be keeping an eye out for, but not really anything huge in terms of their like overall design and overall like big changes. But what did get changed a lot was Mistweaver Monk. Oh my god. Well, they finally updated Jadefire Stomp's icon. Finally. But there's a lot of new talents onto this one. A passive in Dome of Mist. Enveloping Mist transforms 80% of its remaining periodic healing into a dome when dispelled. So, again, more of a PvP-focused talent onto this one. Ancient Teachings is now a baseline effect and transfers damage from Crackling Jade Lightning, but now transfers 30% of damage into healing instead of, I think it was like 45% or so. That being said, there still is a reason to cast your Jadefire Stomp thanks to Jadefire Teachings. So after casting Jadefire Stomp or TFT, Ancient Teachings transfers an additional 140% damage to healing for 15 seconds. And while Jadefire Teachings is active, your stamina is increased by 5%, same as it used to be before. So I'm really excited about this to see if this is going to be the change or the notes that are going to like push a full fist weaving build from Mistweaver into like the limelight. Really, for a while the spec has been this sort of like caster centric setup, as we've seen in Dragonflight, and now in going into the Nerebar Palace it's kind of this odd hybrid. So it really seems like they're fully committing to it, and or at least steadily moving in that direction, which I love to see. Another new talent, Life Cocoon, grants 5 stacks of mana tea and applies 2 stacks of healing elixir to the target. This is actually pretty cool. Being able to apply the healing elixirs. I believe further down in the notes they actually did nerf healing elixir a little bit, but I still love that like automatic effect to heals. And the fact you can provide it to people is not only making the cocoon feel powerful in and of itself, but also this sort of like after effect, this sort of echo effect. Really cool, especially if it scales based off of the target's health. If when using that on tanks, could be really insane, because I think it's like 10 or 15% of health per like healing elixir that is procced. New talent in Rushing Wind Kick, kicking up a powerful gust of wind, dealing nature damage in a 25-yard cone to enemies in front of you, split evenly among them. Damage is increased by 5% for every target hit, up to 30%. Grants Rushing Winds for 4 seconds, increasing Renewing Mist's healing by 50%. Replaces Rising Sun Kick, and it's a choice node with Jadefire Teachings onto that one. So you have the option between having more damage to healing by just using your Jadefire Stomp, usually, as you often would, or by ramping up your Rem healing and also hitting a huge frontal. This, I'm really curious to see how this plays. This could be insanely fun. I almost wonder if it's going to be more of like an AoE focused environment or something that you would use for M+, where Jadefire you might use for a single target boss. Not sure, but I'm really excited to be able to play with it. Monk, honestly, continuing to eat well. Jade Empowerment, another new talent where casting Thunder Focus Tea increases your next Crackling Jade lightning damage by 1,000% and causes it to chain to 4 additional enemies. Choice node with Dance of Chi-Ji. I didn't really have on my bingo board that Monk would get, Mistweaver Monk of all things, would get a use for Crackling Jade Lightning, but I think it's actually pretty cool. I'm not sure how much it's going to feel good to use, buffing it by 1,000% since it's very, very weak as is. So I'm curious to see how much that actually results in. Calming Coalescence has been redesigned. It increases the absorb for Life Cocoon by 80%, which is wonderful since Life Cocoon has felt a little weaker since Dragonflight. Oh yeah, further, Crackling Jade Lightning's base damage has been increased by 100% and channels faster. And Blackout Kick's damage has been increased, so this is pretty exciting. There is a bug with like Master of Harmony that's doing like absurd damage, but once that bug gets resolved, Mistweaver's been pretty low on healer damage for kind of a while now. So seems like they're actually getting some big respect and also finding good ways to synergize that with a damage to healing setup. So very, very excited about that. Awakened Jade Fire additionally causes Blackout Kick to strike 2 additional targets at 70% effectiveness. Actually, that's because I think they rolled in some of the talents and they kind of coalesced them. I don't think it actually shows that it was removed on this one. Actually, no, sorry, Ancient Concordance, duh. And Dance Chi-Ji's chance to trigger has been increased by 100%, and move talent locations and PvP-based Enveloping Mist can be dispelled. So that's part of what the passive was here at the start with Dome of Mist, where you're adding like an extra absorb effect into it. So, yeah. Paladin, man, it's shocking to me that Paladin gets another rework, this time a class tree rework before Priest does. Wild, but there's a lot of really good ones. Also, I'm going to first go over the ones that have been removed, because these are great. Removing Golden Path, where your Consecrate would just randomly heal people. Strength of Conviction, where you needed to stand in your Consecrate. Seals of Order and Mercy. Incandescence, Avenging Wrath Might, Seal of Crusader, like so many talents that have felt pretty tedious to utilize are also now being removed. So these are on the class tree for Holy Paladins. Some of the big ones, you get an automatic sack with Worthy Sacrifice, automatically casting Blessing of Sack on allies within 40 yards when they receive damage below 35%, and you are not in a lost control effect. But it does activate your Blessing of Sack cooldown. So I don't really think you'd love to use this ability too frequently, but it is a pretty neat, conceptual concept. That's what I think talent should really be about, is having these like weird niche choices that you can do whenever you like. Holy Ritual, allies are healed when you cast a blessing spell on them and healed again when the blessing ends. Steed of Liberty, Divine Steed also grants Blessing of Freedom for 3 seconds. I love that. Eye for an Eye, melee and ranged attackers receive holy damage every time they strike you during Ardent Defender, Divine Protection, and Divine Shield. Stoicism, reducing the duration of stun effects. Wrench Evil, making your Turn Evil a instant cast spell. Turn Evil becoming an AoE spell is pretty crazy. It withstand against evil. Righteous Protection, Blessing of Sack now removes and prevents all poison and disease effects. Actually, let me rewind. Having Turn Evil be an AoE fear that you can cast from range that's nuts. We don't really have a lot of undead fights. We have like Necrotic Wake, but that's about it. But if we actually start getting some more undead dungeons, this could be a really nuts talent going forward. I digress. Whew. Light's Countenance, a lower cooldown on Blinding Light and Repentance. Kind of fine. Sacred Strength, Holy Power spending abilities are 2% more effective, but it competes with Divine Purpose, so I'm not really sure how much you'd want to use that. Seems a little underpowered, or quite a bit underpowered. Divine Spurs, Divine cooldown. Steed's cooldown is reduced by 20%, but its duration is reduced by 40%. Adjust Reward, after Cleanse successfully removes an effect from an ally, they're healed. Lay on Hands, out of Imperial Ward, grants the target 100% increased armor for 30 seconds and now ignores healing reduction effects. That's pretty crazy. Especially, there's not too many Mortal Strike debuffs in M+, but there are in, like, Priory. So I could imagine this in, like, the beginning of Priory in Season 2 being really, really insane to sort of, like, bring your tank back to life. Lightbearer, 10% of all healing done to you from other sources heals up to 4 nearby allies, divided evenly amongst them. Selfless Healer, Flash, and Holy Light are 30% more effective on your allies, and 40% of the healing done also heals you. it seems okay. I'm not a huge fan of going back to a caster-centric paladin. If they also included this with like some instant cast proc effects you could have for your holy lights, I'd love it. But not a huge fan of going into more caster-centric holy paladin, I will say. Inspired Guard, Ardent Defender, and Divine Protection increase the healing taken by 15%. Holy Reprieve, your forbearance duration is reduced. Light's Revocation, removing harmful effects with Divine Shield, heals you for 10% for each effect removed, and it cannot exceed 30% of your max health. And you can cast Divine Shield while forbearance is active. This is pretty insane. Like that on its own is definitely worthwhile for talenting into it, if, of course, you have the real estate. Blessed Calling, allies affected by your blessings have a 15% increased movement speed. Yeah, fine. Lead the Charge, Divine Steed, reduce the cooldown of 4 nearby allies' major movement ability by 3 seconds, and your movement speed is increased by 3 seconds. I'm not a huge fan of these kind of talents in general, but hey, if it's a niche choice, cool. Divine Reach, the radius of your auras is increased. Oopsie. Sorry, chat. By 20 yards. Fist of Justice is a flat cooldown reduction for your Hammer of Justice. Sanctified Wrath's been redesigned, and it now increases the duration of Avenging Wrath and causes its respective specialization effect. Was able to be its own spell. Consecrated Ground is now a class tree talent. Auras of the Resolute additionally teaches the Paladin Crusader aura, since they removed it from the talents. Judgment damage has been increased. Judgment's cooldown has been reduced. Hodge's base cooldown has been reduced. Avenging Wrath increases crit strike chance by default because, again, as we mentioned, Avenging Wrath Might was removed. Unbound Freedom now additionally targets a nearby ally by default if you cast Freedom on yourself. So that was the double freedoms. Lightforged Blessing now heals for 3% of max health for all specializations. Of Dusk and Dawn, Dawn's effects have been increased by 10% for Prot and Ret, and by 5% for Holy Paladins. Divine Toll's icon has been updated. Fist of Justice and Holy Aegis are now 1-pointers. Vengeful Wrath, Zealot's Paragon are now 2-pointers. Lots to unpack, but basically, this boils down to Holy Paladin just kind of looking like they're getting more streamlined options, more niche picks for some talents, and some very good universal picks that they can have for their talents without having to take some talents like Strength of Conviction that are just overly tedious to be able to take. Word of Glory got a 5% healing buff. We love that. Shield of the Righteous got a damage buff by 10%, so we love to be able to see that as a note because of Strength of Conviction. Personally, I think 10% is too little for Shield of the Righteous since Holy Paladin's damage is enormously low. We'll see where things go. Lightsmith Paladin, of course, since this is the healing environment we're talking about. Authoritative Rebuke is a new talent. Successfully interrupting an enemy's spellcast reduces your Rebuke's cooldown by a second, and your effect is increased by 100% when you have an armament up. So, more kicks, yay. Tempered into Battle, when you or an ally wielding a bulwark are healed above max health, transfer 100% of the overhealing to your ally. When you or an ally wielding a sacred weapon drop below 40%, redistribute your health immediately and every 1 second for 4 seconds. I'm very curious to see how fast your health is going to be moving or adjusting if something like that happens. It sounds to me like the Holy Bulwark setup is like a 1-to-1 relationship with you and your Bulwark target. So it's almost like a Lifebind type effect or even like a Piety Overheal effect that you can have, except for it's just you and one other person. So you could just blast into a Word of Glory into yourself, and then it just has it jump to that other person to heal them, which is pretty neat. Although this seems enormously PvP focused, so I still think Lightsmith Paladin still needs some more loving of some kind for the Holy Paladin players out there. Now on to the Priest, and as you might have noticed, it's not as long as Paladins, unfortunately. Fortitude, just like all the other raid cooldowns, cost less mana, yay. Sustained Potency has been updated. This is competing with the additional Halo healing and damage effect. It pauses the duration of Apotheosis, Dark Ascension, or Void Form for up to 20 seconds while out of combat or affected by a loss of control effect. This was adding 5 or 6 seconds or something like that to your next Apotheosis. It was pretty mid. This effect, pausing your Apotheosis until you get back into combat again, doesn't seem great either, but I get it. I guess they're just making some changes. Fixed a couple bugs with an issue causing Cyclone and other effects to prevent Halo from Power Surge. From firing, fixed an issue causing Halo to not be castable during Divine Ascension. They made a PvP version of the Entropic Rift for Voidweaver Disc Priest and Voidweaver Shadow Priest. It displays a low noise version for your allies instead of being completely invisible. We'd love to see that, so it's not blocking everything. For Holy Priest, from Darkness Comes Light, this is your dot damage converting into extra flash heal value. This also triggers from Holy Fire damage. It's pretty cool, but it also is competing with your Protective Light, which is the damage reduction from casting flash heals. So I don't really think that you would want to give up on that damage reduction, but honestly, I wouldn't mind trying it once they actually update this to see if it's a pretty substantial output increase. Since Holy Priest isn't casting lots of Shadow Pains in combat, most of the time they're prioritizing the Holy Fires first as often as they possibly can. So could be a cool idea to be able to see. And on the Shaman tree, there is the Ascendance models being updated. So we get the water resto effect, and it allows you to also float on water, which is kind of nice. Updated spell visuals for Lava Burst is kind of nice. P-Wave icon, then updated from the Shadowlands version, is, kind of nice. But not too many things. Ancestors are preferring to Chain Lightning your target when you cast Chain Lightning or the targeted version of Earthquake. Ancestors are now summoned and equipped with a historic Shaman set, so they're not naked, which is great. Elemental Blast from your Ancestors prioritize your most recently attacked target when possible. I think that was more of an Ellie thing, but cool. Onto that one. Elemental and Enhanced got a pretty steep amount of changes onto this one. Farseer has a couple more, where routine communication triggers from Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Ice Fury, Frost Shock, and has a 5% chance to call an Ancestor instead of 8%. So that's all the Ellie stuff, since Resto is basing their proc chances off of Riptide on that end. But Totemic on the side of Resto did actually get a couple of changes. The chain heals from Lively Totems are now cast by the Shamans. This is important for details, so you can actually differentiate between the different chain heal cast. It was all kind of merged together in details, and it also makes it so that it clarifies, like they say, that, hey, you're consuming high tide effects. That's because you are the one casting it. There's a new talent called Coalescing Water, where Chain Heal increases the initial healing of your next Riptide by 75%, stacking up to 2 times, and Chain Heal's mana cost reduced by 15%. Reactive Warding now also allows Earth Shield and Water Shield to consume charges of the shields 1 second faster. This is going to be great for just a Totemic build in general, since they were already having to worry a little bit more about their mana. Having more effective Riptides is going to be huge. Having a base cost for your Chain Heals being lower just means you could actually use your Chain Heals and actually hard cast them yourself without leaning on your totems to do all of the work for you. All of those things are going to be great. High Tide's progress is tracked through an aura called Swelling Tide. When Swelling Tide's stack count reaches 100, High Tide triggers. So that's nice to have a bit more predictable of a time and predictable of a moment for when you're actually going to trigger it. And of course, it restarts at the beginning of raid encounters. They updated the wording on Surging Totem and Oversurge. I think that's when, it's Ascendance is up and it's causing your Healing Rain to heal for more at that period, I believe. Fixed an issue with Nature Swiftness to be consumed when Surging Totem is used. Nature Swiftness was also consuming your free chain heal casts from your totems before, but they fixed that in beta. They also fixed an issue causing the chain heal from Totemic Rebound to sometimes target pets instead of players. So this is the additional jump that your totems were triggering, and it was basically just all going to waste. So really nice buff for Totemic, fixing those issues, fixing the issue causing Reactive Warding to not heal the Shaman sometimes when refreshing Earth Shield. That was mainly just another talent issue onto that end. So that is quite a bit of changes coming in for the healers going into the 20th anniversary update. Some massive ones, I would say, coming in on the side of Holy Paladin in particular. Basically just having much greater efficiency in how they're trying to route through a lot of their talents, and a lot less garbage that they have to sort through. As Paladin players, not having to stand in your Consecrate all the time to actually do healing is ridiculously nice. Although I'm very surprised that we haven't had much in the way of overall healer tuning, as I was expecting at some point to be seeing a 3 or 5% increase or decrease to certain healers going into it. But I am enormously excited about what they're going to be doing over here with Mistweaver Monk. I'm really interested to see how this Ancient Teachings revamp and how they're adjusting Jadefire Teachings and making it a window to do more damage and do more healing as a result. Super excited if that's going to mean that there's some possibilities for a fist weaving build, or at least it's the beginning of it, to add those kind of changes going forward. But let me know what you guys think about these redesigns, and when we get the opportunity to do so, we'll be sure to be testing them a ton in raids and in M+. So make sure you're checking out our live streams, subscribing to the channel as well, and big love to our patrons for making all this content possible. This is our 20th anniversary update for the PTR dev notes. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.